everyone, and welcome to today's podcast episode of Modernization Accepted, a podcast by Resolute Software. I'm your host, Veselka, and today I have with me two very special guests, Ali Rehman, Director of Marketing at Tech Knowledge, and Diyana Kornovska, who is our Growth Marketing Manager here at Resolute. Welcome, guys. Very nice to have you on board.
Likewise.
Journey.
Glad to be here.
Okay. So for today's topic, we have a very interesting thing that I would like to discuss with you, which is growth marketing reimagined beyond the hacking illusion. We're going to touch some very interesting topic within the digital marketing space, which I'm very excited to hear your insights about and your expert opinions on quite a few topics.
So, Ali, thank you again for joining us and being a guest on our podcast today. As a person with a vast experience within the digital marketing, I would like to ask you, what do you believe are the most common misconceptions about growth marketing?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for the invite to this podcast. It's an absolute pleasure being here. I always say that, Resolute Software is at the leading edge of what you guys do. I've had some really great experiences with yourself. So this is a great opportunity to sit down with you guys and share my experiences. Coming back to the question you've asked, I think it's a very pertinent question. The misconception around growth marketing, which I feel needs to be highlighted, is that growth marketing is just about acquisition. One common misconception in growth marketing that you commonly hear is that you should solely focus on acquiring new customers or users. While customer acquisition is a key aspect, no doubt about that. All companies aspire to do that. Growth marketing also encompasses retaining your existing customers as well, right? There's no point in getting new customers and you can't retain your existing customers. Optimizing customer lifetime value. You've now acquired customers. How do you get the most out of that relationship? And fostering loyalty, which is also very important. So you have a base of loyal customers that over time grow with yourselves. The other big misconception is the word hacks and shortcuts. And honestly, some people think that growth marketing is all about hacks and shortcuts. It's wrong. It's a big misconception. Surely in a very short-term, goal-oriented strategy, it may work. But when you look at longer-term, hacks and growths, like anything in life, don't really work. Some people think that growth marketing relies solely on these rapid growth tactics. But in reality, effective growth marketing involves more of a strategic long-term approach. It combines things like data analysis, experimentation, long-term sustainable strategies. So again, it's not all about hacks and shortcuts, big misconception. One of the other things that I've come across in my experience is the assumption that one size fits all. So if it's worked for company A that you've had experience in, and now you're working at company B, it's not a one size fits all. You can't just transplant that strategy that worked for you previously in the new company. So you have to really get down to the basics, is understand the goals, understand your audience, understand the market conditions for the business that you're in. Also, another misconception I believe comes across quite regularly is that growth marketing is only focused on and relevant for startups. While when you look at growth marketing, it's applicable to all businesses, size and stages, right? The key thing is that all businesses aspire to grow. So it's not just the startups. Yes, startups during the early stage up until the later stage of the journey do require growth at maybe a significantly higher rate and volume, but that is not an exclusive domain of startups. So again, growth marketing applies across the board for all shapes and sizes of companies. And also, I think one key thing that I feel is a misconception is that growth marketing can independently exist outside of product development. So the way I look at it is that you have a set of tactics, you have a strategy, but if your product is not developing at the rate at which the users or your target audiences want new features, want new innovation, then no matter how good your growth marketing strategy is, be it long-term, short-term, mid-term, if the product doesn't really comply or align with the needs of the market that you're going after, no matter how good the growth marketing strategy and formula is, it's not really going to work. So I think it's a slightly longer answer to the question, but in my opinion, these are the key factors in and around the misconceptions that we see today within the growth marketing domain.
Absolutely. And I think that this is a very important part of the conversation. And I think if I can summarize what you just said, maybe it's like the rabbit and the hare. It's not a very short contest. It's more like a marathon, and you need to be prepared for the long run. And Didi, I'm also excited to hear what you have about on this topic.
First of all, I would also like to thank you for having me today. It's really a pleasure to be here in such great company. Back to the question, Ali, I completely agree with everything you've just listed as common misconceptions. There is a lot of discussion and conversation around the topic of growth hacking recently. By recently, I mean in the last 10 years. It's actually a longer period of time. But there is a lot of terminology that's been flying around that's confusing a lot of people, even within the marketing industry. So any marketing should be about growing your business. So isn't all marketing growth marketing? And this is something that is really interesting, at least to me, and I'm sure about the wider marketing community. I am interested about the topic of growth hacking as well. And what I believe is really a very, very big misconception about growth marketing, talking specifically about growth marketing, is the speed of which things are happening. And the way you kind of summarize that, but it's not. It's definitely a marathon. And scaling a business is hard. It requires investment. It requires experimentation, and it's all about incremental improvements. It's not like a flip a switch thing and success is happening overnight. So I believe this is where the biggest misconception lies, that people are expecting you to succeed fast. And it's not really how things are working out in reality. And another common misconception, apart from the speed, is the allocation of channels, I would say. Because growth, simplest probably definition of growth is using marketing activities that are growing your business. But I would say that sometimes this might be too simplistic, in a way that it has a bit of a negative connotation, meaning that you can sometimes ignore or not invest in activities that are not explicitly impacting the growth of your business. And that is, just to give an example, the classic awareness. I believe, especially in B2B, it's very important to also invest in awareness because let's put it straight. If you don't have enough people coming through top of the funnel, then you won't be having enough people converting bottom line. So yeah, just continuing on what Ali just mentioned, I think these are probably the other biggest misconceptions about this.
Completely agree with what you've said. I think one of the critical things is to focus on your marketing mix, understanding what works and what doesn't work. And that comes from testing new things out, experimentation, learning and developing as you go along. And again, as I said earlier, there is no one size that fits all. So every business is different. Every marketing mix should be aligned to the business, the target audience that you're going after, the product that you're selling. And once you get that recipe right, easier said than done, things automatically are going to progress forward.
Okay. I also have a question for you. So we've talked about the misconceptions regarding growth hacking and are there any shortcuts? So I'm assuming that you talk from experience, both of you, and you've probably heard about getting past results for yesterday. And how do you kind of manage to change that cultural stigma around growth hacking, which apparently does not really exist. So we really need to have a long-term strategy. So give me examples of how you manage to convince people around you that it's not about hacking, it's about the long-term strategy, investing in the right touch points, and also not only getting new leads, but also having internal marketing procedures to actually retain customers.
I mean, that's a really good question. It's a pretty loaded question, and I just don't want to go off on a tangent and talk forever. I think what you've sort of raised is something very common. All companies, all teams aspire to grow quickly, and sort of focusing on the fact that can we get yesterday's results today, which is a very nice way of putting it. It's a very hard conversation, and the starting point of progressing away from this kind of mindset is that growth marketing or growth in general is a more of a cultural shift than just allocating budget and hoping for the best. Growth does not happen in isolation. It has to have not only management buy-in, it has to have clear objectives and also a product that can complement those growth objectives. So I think it's more of a cultural shift that one needs to aspire. The conversations that have really worked in my experience are mostly data-led. You cannot, in most cases, refute data. So coming up with that growth equation, or you can call it a demand equation, is really important, but it takes time. Unless you've not reached that point, you have to keep on experimenting. So when I talk about growth equation or demand equation, it's a very simplistic way of looking at things, but it, in my opinion, is the right way of looking at things, and it's the right way of communicating upwards within the organization on how and what to expect from the investment that the company is going to put into growth efforts. And that statement is your simple ROI calculations, right? Where you're saying, okay, if I were to put X amount of budget within certain tactic against a certain audience, group of people, with a particular product, what am I going to get out of it? Now, on paper, it looks simple, but you cannot rely on benchmarks because businesses are very, very different. You can use benchmarks directionally, but you have to come up with your own benchmarks over time. You have to come up with your own growth or demand equation over time. And then when you have it and you've run it through a certain period of time, then you can play around with the levers, and then you can adjust and be a bit more predictable. So the conversation in that later stage of your journey becomes a bit different. It's more about how do we adjust the levers rather than how do we get the levers to work. So you see, I think there is quite a vast amount of information and data required to discuss the impact of growth over time. And I think, as I said earlier, for me, what has worked is that data-led conversation. And it's not just about the tactics. It's not just about the MarTech. It's about your ideal customer, their profiles, the size of the market that you're going after, the behavior of the market that you're going after, the cultural nuances that you need to consider, because not all, again, as I said, not all platforms perform the same way in all countries across the world. So I think it's a pretty interesting conversation, to say the least. Some teams and management are more receptive to it, whilst others still sort of believe that, putting money in growth tactics will automatically result in significant growth in sales, pipelines, or whatever that you're being measured on. So I hope that kind of gives you some context.
If you allow me to add to that, Ali, thank you very much for answering that question. I completely agree with every point you've made. And I just wanted to say something going back to the topic of hacking. I believe that we haven't done ourselves a favor by trying to go into all those shortcuts all the time, because this is something that is having an impact on all the different stakeholders as well. And talking about senior management, for example, they, by tossing around this term, they expect that we have to be quick in achieving the results, in achieving the targets and doing more and doing more. But in fact, it's really, really a long journey. And as Ali said, we have to be able to back that by data, and it takes time. You have to step on your historical data. And that is taking us back to another topic, embracing a culture of experimentation. And that should be a constant thing. It doesn't matter if it's like an incrementality testing or something that requires big budgets. It can be something that is quite simpler or something that requires less budget, etc. But we have to be active all the time to be able to prove that something works. And that, in the end of the day, would bring us to the predictable revenue, to the ability to predict how much revenue we will be getting once we put X amount of budget into a channel. So this is something that I wanted to add because it's really important, and it's a long journey. We have to really have a strategic viewpoint on how growth is happening. And something that Ali mentioned about the overall cultural change, I completely agree, because everybody needs to embrace this mindset that it takes time, it takes a lot of experimentation, and a lot of collaboration is also very important. Collaboration mainly between marketing and sales, but also with other stakeholders, product development, etc.
Yeah, and I'd like to sort of also share an example. So back in the day, I was working for a telecoms manufacturer, and we were running a quick and dirty, as they say, growth hacking campaign to get mobile app downloads for a particular app. So your conventional channels in and around performance marketing delivered a sway of downloads. So if you look at the equation simplistically, it felt like it was a great success. But again, data has many layers and dimensions to it. What we were not considering is what happens after the download. How many people end up uninstalling it? How many people end up not signing up? How many people end up not using it? So if you were to look at it from a strictly growth hacking or growth marketing perspective, great success, amazing, right? But in reality, the other layers of data, if they're not considered, then we cannot in absolute terms say that the hack worked and should it be done again. So as far as data is concerned as well, we have to look at the whole length and breadth of data, and that takes time and that takes skill. You should, again, coming back to that earlier point about growth as a culture, also requires the right people with the right mindset and the skills to be available in your organization to deliver that growth.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys. And I think that the thin balance between having a long-term strategy and at the same time choosing the right channels and being agile within that strategy is very important. And that balance is extremely hard. So I'm kind of interested to hear. We mentioned multiple touch points before a sale actually happens. And how can businesses actually navigate this complex journey and ensure they're optimizing each touch point effectively?
So great question again. Multiple touch points. I think nobody would refute the fact that the journey between the introduction to a product or a service to actually buying it is not linear by any stretch of the imagination. So there are many touch points that get you to where you need before you actually close a sale or a product download or a purchase or a subscription. And that's also very true for B2B marketing. I say more so true for B2B marketing. In order for companies, in my opinion, to sort of manage the complex marketing journey with multiple touch points, I think the start has to be the ability to, as I said in the previous part of the podcast, is to be able to understand your customer. Once you have a clear understanding on who you're selling, then it gives you an opportunity to map their customer journey. So understand each stage of the buyer's journey from awareness to conversion, and then identify the right key touch points coupled with the right tactics in order to engage them. The other piece I think that's really important is the ability to segment and personalize. This is huge because right at the start I said, one size doesn't fit all. It remains the same with all the touch points that you have in a particular customer journey. So tailor your messaging, make sure that the content that you're promoting is very specific to the audience segment that you're going after. I'm going to and I know it's not a polite word, but don't be lazy in most cases. Look at the data, try to segment as possible and personalize. Then I think on top of that, your content strategy really makes a huge impact. So if you look at multiple touch points, as I said, if you've got just this one material, it could be an ad, it could be a white paper, it could be a case study, it could be an analyst report, and you're just using that one piece of content across all stages of the journey, no matter how pretty your ads are, how pretty your graphics are, how pretty your creative is, it just doesn't work. So you have to map it out and see if the customer or your intended audience is at the start of the journey, what are the kind of things that are most useful for them for their, let's call it a research phase, whereas when they're in the consideration or closer to purchase stage, what is that will be useful for them? So the bad news is there is no fixed formula. So you will have to try different things. So that's where that segmentation and personalization and testing and experimentation again comes into play. And over time, it gets easier. That's the good news. Once you've kind of figured out what works, then you keep on repeating it. And I've seen most of my experience has been within B2B and in the tech industry. And I've seen this evolve over time, where you find that sweet spot and then you start getting more qualified leads that convert into pipeline that closes. Eventually, to get to that stage, there is, some would call, a portion of dead investment that might not yield any considerable pipeline or new customers, but there is no easy way out of it. Again, as we said, hacks work only to an extent, if at all. So again, that broader long-term strategic thinking is required. Use automation where possible. I think for multiple touch points, I've seen companies shy away from that because, as I said earlier, not a polite word, but most of us are lazy and we don't want to really personalize that journey. We don't really want to spend time in creating campaigns, sub-campaigns, steps. So wherever automation is possible, use it. And this will really help in scaling the activities. Be agile, be aligned with sales and marketing. I think that's another big thing, is that, companies end up being in silos. I worked in marketing for most of my career. I worked with salespeople in most of my career. Unless they're not on the same page, the understanding of that transition between touch points is not clear. So sales are waiting instant. I need instant leads. Marketing is saying, well, do you know what? We're right now going through the customer journey. It might take us a certain time to deliver those leads. So unless you don't start off on the same foot, everyone has gotten the necessary information and is educated on what's going to happen, then I think things become easier. And again, I think when it comes to multiple touch points, the key is measure and optimize. And also remember the fact that each touch point may have a slightly different result. So don't try to sort of measure all the touch points with the same brush or with the same KPIs. As I said, channels work very differently. Within channels, once you start segmenting them and adding personalization, the initial ambition of having a universal metric to measure things against kind of goes out of the window. And again, I think I've said this many times, but I'm going to say this over and over again, but it's all about testing, experimenting and personalizing as you go along. If you don't learn your lessons and change, the results are going to be the same. There is no doubt. I mean, anyone who says differently, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with them and learn something new. But if it's not delivered the result once, you repeat it, it's not going to deliver the result again. So you have to learn. And that's where I come back to the whole growth culture. Yes, you need to have the right sort of people in place with the skills to actually complement your efforts.
I cannot really agree more on what you're saying. And just to add about mapping the customer journey, it's also really important, given the different touch points, to see where people are dropping, because this is even more informative than the rest, because it can give you an idea how to optimize your efforts towards achieving your results, and it can help you tweak your strategy in the long run. And one more thing regarding data, because it touched upon, is again the topic about attribution. Because in my opinion, if you're stuck to, let's say, last click attribution model, then it's very easy to think that investment in top of the funnel channels are not going to bring tangible results on your bottom line. While in fact, if you are really understanding the impact each channel is having towards the end goal, then it's way more easier to allocate your resources the right way. And that's bringing us back to data and to the MarTech, to how the companies are geared internally to be able to do that, because it's not that it's not easy, it's very, very hard. And you have to be able, as Ali, you mentioned, in time it gets easier, but also you have to have the right tools in hand, so you can really prove that some activity, although not explicitly showing any significant impact, can actually bring the biggest results in the end of the day, for example.
I cannot agree more with you guys. And I think that it's a very interesting journey that each company takes on in a different way, in a very unique way. And while there are differences between product companies and service companies, there are definitely things that you need to keep in mind. And I think that you both touched on very interesting points, like data attribution and actually getting to the numbers and not being busy and employing automation whenever possible. So I'm kind of interested to hear more about the strategies that you've employed currently within your companies. Of course, not in detail, but anything that you might want to share from your experience.
I think that's a really good question. And I want to, again, slightly take a different track whilst I reply to this. And the reason I want to do that is that I don't want people to take away a strategic model that has worked somewhere else and try to apply it in their own organization. And not that I'm, sort of shying away from sharing knowledge, but I just want to give the listeners of this podcast something that they need to start at the very beginning, the fundamental. And the fundamental start of making sure that your growth strategy is sustainable and long-term is that cultural shift. And it starts with leadership. And again, I don't mean to say that this leadership needs to come from the owner, founder, CEO. If it's coming from there, great. But if it's not, at your own level as well, you can be a growth leader. You can create a vision, an atmosphere, and generate sort of a buy-in from the teams whereby everyone understands the vision of growth marketing and also is able to demonstrate the commitment to embracing change and innovation, because there is going to be a fundamental change or a shift in how you think. And also, as I said, because you need to not only innovate your marketing, but you also need to innovate the product. So I think that whole buy into the vision from a strategic perspective is really important. The other piece I would like to sort of share is cross-functional collaboration. Now, this is that layer or stage that is the most crucial, because growth is not just a marketing pursuit. It requires, of course, the marketing team. You need to also engage and be aligned and collaborating with the product teams, the data analyst, and all other relevant departments. And I think one of the biggest and most important department in that is sales. Sales, from a marketing standpoint, your partners in crime. The closer that relationship is, the clearer the vision is between both those teams on what to expect, things become easier. The more you fight your own corner, not going to work. Promote risk-taking and learning from failures is also a very important standpoint. So I've been in situations where over my career, there have been companies where you've started a growth marketing initiative. And within the first month, the expected, I'd say, ambitious results didn't materialize, and the initiatives were shut down. And that is what you need to avoid, because you have to promote risk-taking. You have to learn from your failures. There's no other way you can not only, I'm using the same word here, not only grow as a team, but grow as a business. So there has to be some sort of ability to not only take risks, but absorb risk and learn from it. Clear goals and metrics, very important. And again, if you look at growth marketing from a funnel perspective, those goals and metrics actually aren't universal across the funnel. So you have to be very clear that if you have doing a certain set of tactics mapped against different stages of the customer journey, what are the goals and objectives or the metrics that you're going to achieve and measure against. So those KPI settings really important. And I can't stress enough that one needs to invest in training and development. Training, again, if you look at growth from an organizational standpoint, there are people that would have come with some experience, knowledge, some would have more, some would have less, but do not assume that universally everyone that is a part of it understands or has had experience in growth marketing. So you may have people within, as an example, you may have people within the creative team that are not data analysts, but they also need to understand the value of data that you're getting from running different ads and creatives against a certain target audience. And based on that, absorb the information and make those iterations on the ads and the creative. Again, all these strategies surrounding growth marketing is new, I think, very significantly. So you have to bear in mind that everyone is not going to know the ins and outs from day one. So invest in training development. And I think most importantly, where companies kind of get fixated on either you are delivering results or not, but there's a middle ground as well. Celebrate small successes. Even if you've not achieved the absolute goal that you've set, is there an improvement through the learnings and the best practices that you've employed during the course of the campaign? That is really important. That motivates people. So if you bundle all of this together, before even looking at a specific strategy, these are the foundations you need to put in place. And then I think strategy, tactics, all can come later. But from my perspective, in my experiences, companies that do these things well succeed. So I hope that was a roundabout way of getting to your question. But that, in my opinion, I think are the more important things than a strategy framework or a template.
Ali, I really love what you just said about celebrating each small victory, because I really believe that growth is a result of a sequence of small wins, and we have to be able to give ourselves credit for that. So completely agree. And based on my experience, I can also say that cross-functional collaboration is one of the things that is really, really helping the marketing organization, not just with sales, but also with other departments that can help you with your content or whatever. There has to be internal partnership so we can all move together, change in the mindset and in the philosophy, everything that you've been stressing so far. So this is something that I truly rely on in my role, because without it, I don't think we'll be able to do anything. We have to really break the silos. And working together with sales is not a nice to have. It's a necessity. It's a must. And I'm trying to imply that in my day-to-day work. I feel like usually there is this thing, sales and marketing being enemies. And I hate this, to be completely honest, using a word I don't like. But yeah, because I feel like, as you're saying, we must be partners in crime. And this is one thing that I'm really practicing in my career. And another thing that we are really relying on in the team is, of course, data. And this needs to be developed over time, whether that is an additional dashboards or additional MarTech that we are using internally to be able to step up our reporting, analytics, and implications game. Let's put it this way. So yeah, I think this summarizes the main strategies that we are using internally.
Well, thank you guys for this conversation. It has been really insightful to take a peek in marketing from your perspective. So, thank you again for joining today's podcast as guests. And for everyone watching, thank you for tuning in. And join us next time when we're going to discuss design systems.
Thank you for having me.